Alright, lesson 8.6 is factoring, and now we're going to factor ax squared plus bx plus c. So the a value, which we had before as a 1, is no longer just simply going to be 1, so it makes the game a little bit more fun. So here we go. I know since I have a y squared, I still need a y and a y. My only factors of 2 are 2 and 1, so that's good. And now my factors of 7 are only a 7 and a 1. So I'm going to try 7 and 1, and ultimately I need to get a 15. Well, if I do it this way, 7 and 1 is going to give me a 7y, 2y and 1 is going to give me a 2y. Well, that is not going to work out to give me a combination of 15y, so I'm going to erase this. So I really encourage you to use pencil when you're doing this. So I'm going to try 1 and 7. So this gives me a 1y and a 14y. I can get a 15y if they're both positive. So my answer is 2y plus 1 and 1y plus 7. Yes, it's okay if you just make that y instead of 1y. Let's try these right here. 3a squared, I know I'm going to need a 3a and an a, and factors of 4. Now I can try 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. So I'm going to try the 1 and the 4. I'm going to go 1 and 4. I'm trying to think ahead because I know 3a and 4 is 12a, and 1 times a is 1a. In order for me to get a negative 13, I need both of these to be negative. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive, so that works out well for me. So 3a minus 1 times a minus 4. Let's try this next one. Factors of 5 are only 5, so 5d and d. Factors of 8 are going to end up being 1 and 8 or 2 and 4, and I'm trying to get an 18 out of this. So I'm going to do 2 and 4, and again I'm thinking ahead. I know that 4 times 5 is 20 and 2 times 1 is 2, so this gives me a 2d and a 20d. I need a negative 18d, so I need the 20 to be negative. I need the 2d to be positive. So the way that I do this is these came from my outer terms, and that is affected by this sign in the second quantity. So I need a negative 20 and a positive 2d. And positive 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. So again, it works. What I suggest you do, and I want you to do, is if you have a negative leading coefficient, I want you to factor it out. So what that means is you're going to change all of these terms to their opposites. And then this negative sign comes along with the answer. So now I'm looking at this. 2b squared is going to be 2b and b. Factors of 12, I'm going to list them over here to the side. I can do 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. And I'm looking for a 5. I'm really not sure. I'm going to try 3 and 4. Let's see if I go 3 and 4. This gives me a 4b, and this gives me a 2b. Not a 2b, a 4b and a 6b. Well, regardless, 4b and 6b are not going to give me a 5b, so that's not going to work. So back to the drawing board, and you can see I'm doing this right here with you. So I warned you to use a pencil, so make sure that you're using a pencil. So I do not want the 4 and the 3. I can try the 3 and the 4. 3 and 4. If I do that, I get a 3b here and an 8b down here. And that will give me a 5b if the 8b is positive and the 3b is negative. So negative 3b, this comes from my inner set of values, and positive 8 comes from my outer. And you have to double check, is negative 3 times positive 4 negative 12? And it is. So my answer is negative, and then the quantity 2b minus 3 times the quantity b plus 4. Alright, this one, again, I'm going to factor out that negative, so I get a 3r squared plus 17r plus 10. So here I'm going to have a 3r and an r. Factors of 10 are only 1 and 5. 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So if I try a 5 and a 2, that gives me a 2r, and this gives me a 15r. I can get a positive 17 if they're both positive. And positive 2 times positive 5 is positive 10, so it works. All right, here I'm going to factor out a negative 2. I do want to try to factor out the greatest common monomial factor, and all of these are divisible by 2, and again I want to factor out the negative. So negative 4 divided by negative 2 is 2, and I get an s squared. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3, and I have s. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. So I have negative 2. Oops. The only factors of 2 are 2 and 1. I want a 3, so I'm going to go 2 and 1, because this gives me a 1s and a 4s. To get a positive, or I'm sorry, a negative 3s, I need the negative to be with 4s and the positive here, so plus, minus, and positive 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, so again, it works. These will take you longer to do because they don't have coefficients of just a 1. And in some cases, and we'll see if this is on the next slide, they're not going to have prime values for a. You know, out of these 6, 5 out of the 6 had prime values of a, and then 12 I factored out a common factor to make it prime. That's not always going to be the case. Okay, so here it says you can check your factorization using a graphing calculator. So when we do that with a graphing calculator, we can go negative 4x squared plus 12x plus 7. When you factor it, you get negative the quantity 2x plus 1 times the quantity 2x minus 7. You can actually check it, and I'm going to show you how with the Desmos.com in just a moment. In y1, you'll put the original polynomial. In y2, you'll put your factored form, and then when you graph them, they should be identical. For example, I have the polynomial I put into Desmos. It's 6x squared plus 1x minus 2. I factored it on a different piece of paper, but I think my answer is y equals, and then parentheses, I have 3x plus 2. Oops, that is not parentheses. It would help if I looked up. Parentheses. All right, there's 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 1. Now, if they're identical, it's going to be the exact same graph, and it just covered it over in blue. So it is identical. So this is a way that you can check to see if your answer is correct by using Desmos.com with your graphing calculator. All right, I already alluded to finding a common factor. So it says you've learned to factor out the greatest common monomial factor from the terms of a polynomial. Sometimes you might need to do this before finding the two binomial factors for a trinomial. So for example, an athlete throws a discus from an initial height of 6 feet and with an initial vertical velocity of 46 feet per second. Remember that vertical motion model is negative 16t squared plus vt, v is the initial velocity, plus s, and s is the starting height. Here they're asking us to find the equation in part A. So part A, I've got my height equals negative 16t squared. The initial vertical velocity is 46 feet per second, so t, and the initial height is 6 feet. So here's the original equation. It says after how many seconds does the discus hit the ground? So we want to know when is it at 0. So negative 16t squared plus 46t plus 6. So it's going to make this easier if I first factor out a common factor. Well, the only common factor here is a negative 2. So I'm going to factor out negative 2. And remember, I said before, if you have a negative leading coefficient, factor it out. So this is going to give me an 8t squared minus 23t minus 3. And this is what I need to now factor. Well, here I know it's a 3 and a 1 because I at least have a prime number for my product at the end. But for 8, I can try 1 and 8, or I could try 2 and 4. I'm really not sure what to try, so I'm going to try 8 and 1. So this is t and t. So this gives me a 24t, and this gives me a 1t, and I did get lucky. I need a negative 24t, so to get that I'll go negative, positive, so the negative and positive go here. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, so that works out for me. Now I set each of these factors equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. So the negative 2, since it does not have a variable, I don't need it anymore in my answer because it's not going to contribute to any of the t values. So I'll go t minus 3 equals 0, and 8t plus 1 equals 0. Here I will add 3 to get 3 seconds. Here I would subtract 1 and divide by 8. This is one of those non-essential answers. Algebraically it works, but you cannot have the discus back on the ground at negative 1/8 of a second. So your final answer is just t equals 3 seconds. Alright, so here is your assignment for 8.6 if you'd like to get started on it. It's page 538 to 540, numbers 4 to 56 even, and 58 to 61.